Hello again, and what is hip, and welcome back to another video. And I've been looking forward to making this video for such a long time. I've been looking for an excuse to talk about this game ever since I played through it. And I decided to make a video talking about my favorite video game of 2023. And that game is none other than Final Fantasy XVI. Wow. This game has gotten feedback from across the board, all across the board. I mean, there have been really great reviews, there's been negative reviews, but the common review is this game is not a great Final Fantasy game. And that's where the problem lies. I am a longtime Final Fantasy fan. I've played through most of them. I just beat Final Fantasy V this year, and I love the old Final Fantasy, but Final Fantasy has been changing for many years, as I'm sure all of you know. Pretty much ever since Final Fantasy X and 12, they've been going a different direction, and kudos to them for doing that. I mean, it takes a lot of guts to really change a tried and true formula and experiment, and that's what they've been doing. Failing more often than succeeding, but each time gets a little more better. A little better. And Final Fantasy XVI is the result of all these years of attempting to improve upon their ideas. And when you look at Final Fantasy XVI as a Final Fantasy game, I think that is not the best idea. Final Fantasy XVI really is its own kind of thing. It's inspired by Final Fantasy, but it's not. It doesn't feel like the old Final Fantasy games. It doesn't even feel like Final Fantasy 15, especially not 12 or 13 or 10. It's its own thing, and when you view it as its own thing, it is really phenomenal. And another mistake people make, I think, is they compare this to other open world games. I think that's a mistake because it's really not an open world game. It is, to an extent. I guess you could almost view it as like Monster Hunter, where there's different areas, some really big areas, some smaller, but it's really more of a linear experience. And when you compare it to other linear experiences, this game is huge. There are so many choices for a game that is a linear experience. It's in that weird middle ground between the experience and open world. And so when you compare it to an open world, it really is pretty limiting. But when you compare it to these other linear experience-driven games, it is quite big. And once I did that, I really realized how great this game was. So where to begin? I guess starting off with the side quests. The side quests in this game, there are tons of them. And yes, a lot of them are kind of vanilla, go fetch this and that, but there are a lot of really great tiny stories embedded in these side quests. I mean, there are moments where you do what you see as like a meaningless kind of side quest that is mentioned later in the game, significantly later in the game, where they'll make reference to something that you did or a person that you did something for in the beginning of the game that I don't think they would mention if you didn't do that side quest originally. And that was cool. There's tons of little moments like that where they just intertwine with the whole story and the lore, and I love that. It really made doing these side quests more rewarding, even if not all of them, were reinventing the wheel. Some of them did, but a lot of them did not. But knowing that you were actually making an impact on the world that stayed throughout the game really made doing these quests worth it, and that was something I really enjoyed. Now, one of the biggest side quests in the game is the monster hunting board, and that's basically run by this Moogle, which is really nice to see, but also kind of weird to see in a realistic setting. But It's where you go and you basically hunt these monsters. And the combat that gets us into the combat. The combat is phenomenal. I have pretty much completely given up any hope that the Final Fantasy series, at least mainline series, will return to their turn-based kind of days. I've let that go. I let that dream go, and I've accepted where they are going now. And once you accept where they are and where they're going, you can really appreciate this battle system for what it is. It's basically a mixture of Final Fantasy 15 and 7 Remake. It's very good. I prefer 7 Remake just because it's a little more turn-based feeling. However, this really is a good medium. I enjoy this more than Final Fantasy 15's combat, and I did enjoy Final Fantasy 15's combat. It's action-based. There are a couple of kind of turn-based elements thrown in. The summoning is also really cool. Basically, you have these icons, and you can switch between them. It's almost like a job class from like Final Fantasy V, where you're switching jobs, you're switching icons, you're switching elements, and each icon has a whole ring of different abilities that you can mix and choose from and upgrade and all of that. It's really it's quite in-depth, and it's a solid substitute for a job type system, and they do it very well, and it makes battling fun. And the exciting thing is these battles are not easy. It's no cakewalk. Some of these are hard. I have died lots of times. They threw in these special items that took the place of difficulty settings. So they give it to you at the beginning of the game where you, like, one item slows down time and makes it easier to parry and stuff like that, completely optional. I never used any of those, so I'm sure the game would definitely be a little easier if you did. But without them, oh my goodness, I mean, this game gets hard. There are some tough moments, and there are moments where you have to grind too, which I was not expecting. You have to level grind at some spots, which was a pleasant surprise because I love grinding for levels. I enjoy that. So the battle system is great. You also have your fellow party members as well that you don't have direct control of. You have your dog that you do have direct control of to an extent. I'm fine with that. For the action-based, obviously, I would guess I would prefer that over having direct control over everybody. It's just one less thing to focus on, and you have to focus on yourself a lot with this combat. So moving on from the combat, that brings us to the music. Now, the music in this game I actually thought was probably the weakest part of this game, and it really makes me sad to say. I don't get any joy from saying that. Final Fantasy 15 had an amazing soundtrack. It was phenomenal, one of my favorite in the series. Final Fantasy 16 overall, the soundtrack didn't do much. There were definitely some standout tracks, especially towards the end of the game. They placed some tracks in there that really tug the heartstrings and really makes you feel the anticipation and the excitement. There are some great tracks in this game, but overall a lot of them kind of just blended into the background for me. But, you know, still good, just not great, not memorable. That's the thing. A lot of these tracks were not memorable. In fact, I really can't think of one that was memorable at all through this whole game. Versus 15, you have Somnus, and you have some really great memorable soundtracks from there. But no, it had its moments, but overall, not my favorite. Now, the characters, we're going to talk about that before the story. Oh my gosh, these have to be up there as some of the best characters in any video game I have ever played. These characters are so well written. Jill, one of the main characters in the game, has become, gosh, she's up there as like top 3 Final Fantasy characters of all time. Maybe my favorite heroine of all time in a Final Fantasy game. She is so well written. And Sid in this game, another amazing character, probably my favorite Sid. in every Final Fantasy game. And they are so well written. It is crazy. You will fall in love with these characters. You will cry. You will laugh. I did all of that. What makes these characters so special is they're not really overwritten. Final Fantasy 15 had a lot of kind of stereotypical tropes with the characters, like these bad boys. You had the goofy one, you had the smart one, you had the muscles. These characters aren't really like that. They are written in a way that is very, I guess you could say, realistic, at least for a Final Fantasy game, and very, very, you can compare yourself to these characters. You can relate. They're very relatable, and that's why I loved them so much. They were so well written. Now the main character, Clive, is also pretty well written. There are a couple of times he's kind of this kind of manly man. He's got the low voice and the gravel voice and all that stuff, kind of like Batman or something. And there are times where it's kind of cheesy. It almost falls into that Final Fantasy 15 kind of thing. However, as the story goes on, they actually handle him quite well. And it never gets to the point where it's too much. It was very well written, and I actually found myself really enjoying Clive as a character, which I was not expecting to say, just based off of the image alone. I mean, he looks like another one of the brothers from Final Fantasy 15. But no, they did very well with his character and all of the characters. They are fantastic. They were fantastic. I find myself thinking about these characters still to this day, months after beating this game. Now, the story in this game it's intense. It's very intense. Final Fantasy 15 did the thing where they had like an anime and another game and books and all this stuff with all this different lore and movies, all that stuff. It was a lot, and they separated it. Final Fantasy 16 takes all of that and they put it in the game. But you have to reference an encyclopedia kind of thing all the time. There's this character in here called Tomes, and you talk to him, and he basically is this in-game encyclopedia where he has all the areas, all the states, all the story, all the lore in one area, and you can read through it. And I don't think that's the best way of doing things. They don't do a great job at really explaining things clearly throughout gameplay. You do have to reference these encyclopedias all the time. They have a special thing in there where you can hold down the touchpad during a scene, and it pops up related lore definitions and things to the scene you're in. So you'll be watching a cutscene with a castle in this specific part. You press the little map pad, it pops up, oh, the castle, this is what the castle is. Oh, this is the name of the land, this is the history of this. That's what it does, and it updates throughout the game. Not the best way of doing things. That part was cool, how you could just pop it up at any time, but you have to do that. That's what I didn't like. I wish that it was just something that you felt like, oh, I want to know a little more about this. No, if you don't do it, you'll find yourself being kind of clueless at some things throughout the game. But if you do it and you study up on the lore, it's actually quite fascinating. And the story gets, no spoilers, the story gets pretty big and just huge. Beyond yourself as a character. It's a very big story. But the way they handled it and the way they handled the ending, I thought was perfect. I thought it was perfect. I thought the ending was what it needed to be. And that's all I will say. It was expertly crafted. And the story itself really does engage your interest from the beginning, because you're always wondering, wait, what's going on? What's this? And they'll give you little hints and all of that stuff. And it all intertwines with one another. It's a very well-connected story once you kind of study up on the lore and all of that. But about halfway through the game, once you're familiar with everything, then you don't have to pull it up quite as much, and you kind of are able to just go with the flow and all of that. But the story was wonderful as well. But really what sold me was just the characters in this world and their struggles and the moments of joy that they have and the moments of extreme sadness and all of that. This is a dark game. There are so many moments where I was just like, where my eyes just like almost pop out of my head in just disbelief. Like, there were so many moments like that, and there were moments where I was playing this and I was yelling. I was like, "Oh, please do this, please do this!" You know, I was engaged with this story. It was a wonderful time and a wonderful experience, and I hope the DLC that was announced to this is good. I really do, because I want to return to this world, and returning to this world to capture gameplay footage has been a treat. It has been an absolute treat. I love these characters. I love this game. This is my game of the year, and I hope you all give it a chance. Don't come into this as, you know, another Final Fantasy game. View it as its own thing. It's a big game, a huge game. There are lots of things to do, lots of side quests. There is a world to explore. It's not just linear paths like Final Fantasy 13. But just know it's not like the other Final Fantasy games. It's its own thing. And I think that's actually quite nice, in a way. Do I miss the old Final Fantasy? Absolutely. But there does come a time where you just kind of have to accept where they're going. And once you do that, I really do think that you will enjoy this game. Or at least I hope you do. But yeah, Final Fantasy 16. An amazing game. I hope you all give it a try. Have you guys played Final Fantasy 16? Let me know in the comments below. And what was your favorite game of 2023? I would absolutely love to know. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all are having a wonderful December, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one.